In this video, we're going to look at how to use factoring to solve for the zeros of a quadratic equation. So what that means is if we have our parabola, that parabola is going to cross the x-axis at 2 points. And so if this is a factorable polynomial, we can use that fact to find those two x-intercepts, the two places where the graph crosses the x-axis. So if you think about what the y value on the x-axis is, well, the y value tells you how far up or down you are. So if you're right in the middle on the x-axis, the y value is 0. So what we can do is we can take this equation here and we can plug in 0 for y. And that's what we're going to do. So 0 for y. And then we want to solve this equation by factoring. Now in this video, I'm going to assume that you already know how to factor. If you don't know how to factor, go back to the factoring videos, watch those and figure it out. So this factors to x plus 2 and x minus 6. So what we can do now is we can say, all right, we've got two things multiplied together and they equal 0. So we've got x plus 2 multiplied by x minus 6, and when we multiply those, we get 0. So if you think about how you can multiply things to get 0, well, the only way that can happen is if one of the numbers is 0. So you couldn't take like 5 times 6 and get 0. You'd have to have something like 5 times 0. So if you multiply numbers and you get 0, the only way that can happen is if at least one of those numbers is 0. So that means we can take x plus 2 and say, well, this could be 0, because if x plus 2 is 0, then this thing in the box is 0, and then we would get 0 times whatever x minus 6 is, and we'd get 0. But we could also have x minus 6 be 0. So if x minus 6 is 0, then what's in the red box is 0, and we get 0 times whatever x plus 2 is, and so we get 0. So these are the two ways that this could be 0. So if we solve each of these for x, we can get the two solutions. So for the green equation, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, so we get x equals negative 2. And for the red equation, we're going to add 6 to both sides, and so we get x equals 6. So the two solutions to this equation then are x equals negative 2 and x equals 6. Another way that you can think about this is think about what you would have to plug into the set of parentheses in order to make that 0. For the green one, where we have x plus 2, we'd have to plug in negative 2 in for x in order to get 0, because then negative 2 plus 2 would be 0, and then we'd have 0 times whatever x minus 6 is. Same thing with x minus 6 in the red box. If we think about what we'd have to plug in to make that red box 0, well, if we plug in 6, then we'd have 6 minus 6, that's 0, and so that gives us the answer as well. We can do this when we have more complicated factoring as well. So again, what we want to do is plug in 0 for y, because if we're trying to find the x-intercepts, that's where the graph crosses the x-axis, that is where the y value is 0. So again, I'm going to assume that you know how to factor. If you don't know how to factor, go back and watch the factoring videos. This factors to x minus 3 and 5x minus 2. We can do the same thing now. So we can say either x minus 3 must be 0 or 5x minus 2 must be 0. That's the only way that we can get 0 out of this, is if either one of these things that are being multiplied together is 0. So for the first one, we can say x minus 3 could be 0, and if we solve that, we get x equals 3. So that's one of the answers. That's one of the solutions. For the other one, we can say, well, 5x minus 2 could be 0, and then we solve this equation, so add 2 to both sides. We get 5x equals 2, then divide both sides by 5, and we get x equals 2/5. So that is the other solution. So the two solutions to this, the two x-intercepts, the places where the graph crosses the x-axis, are 3 and 2/5.